made real progress, first of all. We really need to say that. Cancer Care Ontario has shortened wait times dramatically. We are really going to be focusing on seniors in particular. Clearly there's a demographic fact that baby boomers are aging. Certainly in my riding here in Ridges-Markham, I find many seniors are living with their children and their grandchildren, and they are facing health issues. So we are introducing more home care services so that people can age at home, so more care for the frail elderly. We have instituted, there's been negotiation to increase the number of house calls by physicians. So for seniors, if they just need their blood pressure checked or a few routine kind of tests or examinations, a physician will attend at the home.
What about the people who can't find a doctor?
Oh, seriously, we've made huge strides. We have 1.3 million more Ontarians with a family doctor than when we took office. We've increased medical school spaces. We have increased the residencies for international medical graduates. In fact, 25% of all physicians in Ontario now obtain their medical degrees elsewhere, outside of Canada. We've increased the family health teams, and I know from some of my staff who've recently moved to this riding, they've just walked into the family health team and they've been accommodated immediately with a family doctor. So I don't think we're seeing what we saw when we took office 8 years ago at all. I've had a lot of conversations. As you probably know, the Greenbelt Act came in after the Oak Ridges Moraine Act, which in fact the previous Conservative government instituted, which froze development in a very large part of the Moraine. Kudos to the Harris government for doing that. We went a step further with the Greenbelt. In terms of the review, it was instituted in 2005. There is a review planned for 2015. And leading up to that time, there will be a lot of consultation. I've had many, many conversations with the regional chairman, Bill Fish, as an example, who is a proponent for developing that corridor along the 404 that you've talked about. I think we have to look at what infrastructure would be required and the costs associated with bringing water and sewer and the necessary infrastructure to have really effective industry, commercial outlets along that corridor. I would look at that with a very open mind. I think there's a benefit to that in terms of our economy to develop that corridor. I'm very excited by the announcement of two-way, all-day, 7-day-a-week GO train service in all corridors. I really pushed for the extension of the Richmond Hill line up to Gormley. Metrolinx, which is responsible for the whole transit planning across the GTA, has really laid out a good blueprint. But I think it does take the individual member of provincial parliament to sort of go to the Minister of Transportation and say, you know what, maybe you look at the growth in my riding as just sort of numbers on a page. These are real people who want to get to work, who need to get around the region. Public transit is an absolute necessity. I really believe it's a situation of if you build it, they will come. As you've heard, the Premier is holding the line in terms of where we are with taxes presently. Obviously, we have cut small business tax. We have made it's now down to 4%. 93% of Ontarians have seen a reduction in their personal provincial income tax. Taxes are there for a purpose. They're to provide the services people rely on. And I can tell you at the door, people truly appreciate what we've done in education and healthcare with the revenues that we've generated. Tax cuts, it's so simplistic. I mean, it's really clearly going to result in service cuts. And when you cut services, you're going to cut jobs. We see our taxes as an investment in building a brighter future for Ontario. It's as simple as that. I'll give you an example that I was involved with. I was parliamentary assistant to the Minister of the Environment. He asked me to look very closely at some of the grants that were being given to various community organizations and even municipalities, conservation authorities and so on, to see were there measurable outcomes from some of those programs. we were able to cut $2.5 million out of, So this is an ongoing process within each ministry. Our Minister of Finance, Dwight Duncan, is, I can tell you, a very fiscally conservative individual. I have an MBA, a Master's in Business Administration. It's my desire to be as efficient and as prudent with our resources as possible. And he has told every minister that they need to look at a 5% reduction in terms of efficiencies in their own organizations.
So it will be a focus?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's my personal conviction, is the way I run my own personal life. We have to do it. It's the people's money. And we have to guard it and make sure it's used as wisely as possible. It's being rolled out, as I'm sure you know, and should we be re-elected, it will be across the province by 2014. I can tell you at the door, it's absolutely one of the most popular programs. Of course, it's optional. I've met some stay-at-home moms who say, it's not for me, but I know my neighbors are finding it a wonderful thing to be able to have the educational component, the childcare component under one roof, safe location, monitored by the Ministry of Education, obviously, for the full day. So we're going to continue to roll that out. Mr. Hudak did call it a frill, as you may recall, though I believe he's now been convinced that, in fact, he should maintain that program. We're going to be putting in place some after-school programs for the age 6 to 12-year age group. Post-school childcare can be quite an issue for a number of parents in terms of where their child goes.
How about education, though, at the older end of the spectrum? Because young people are graduating and not able to find jobs. Well,
one of the things, we certainly believe that our investments in post-secondary are absolutely crucial. We've increased the number of positions in university, obviously, because we need as well-educated a workforce as we can possibly have. Those are the sorts of jobs that are going to be coming to Ontario and are coming to Ontario, the high-tech, knowledge-based economy. But we are committed to reducing the cost of tuition for college and university by 30%. Even though we've opened up student loans and we have given many more grants, it is becoming sometimes unaffordable for families. They're really concerned. I met a mum with 5 kids yesterday at the door, and so she's looking ahead with a certain amount of trepidation. We understand that. We don't want anyone to feel that they cannot access a post-secondary education because of affordability. But on the other end of of things, we've increased our apprenticeships. We've gone from 60,000 to 120,000. And my son is in his 3rd year of his plumbing apprenticeship. And again, we've talked about the growth in this area. Trades are just begging for people who, it's a 5-year commitment as an apprentice. But what a rewarding thing to have at the end of the day when you get your papers.
I'd like to ask you what you're most proud of and the project that you think you accomplished the most in the last 4 years.
Yes, I would have to say it was my work on the Select Committee on Mental Health and Addictions. Partly because it was a non-partisan committee of the legislature. In other words, the Conservatives had representatives, the NDP, as well as the Liberals. And for 18 months, we worked together. We heard deputants. It was something like 250 deputations from institutions, organizations providing mental health and addictions care, as well as the general public, survivors, parents, family members. And we traveled around the province to get some input into what we should do around mental health and addictions. And we produced a report that was released August 2010 with 23 recommendations. And then we agreed, each of us within our own parties, that we would go and lobby our caucuses to adopt the report. We made a recommendation that we need to start with children's mental health. We have children falling through the cracks. The wait times, you've alluded to this, we may have really improved them for some areas of healthcare.
To see a psychiatrist
exactly.
if you have an issue is almost impossible.
Unless it's an absolute crisis, and you don't want to get to that crisis. You know, of course, there was so much neglect of our healthcare system under the previous Harris government that we've been rebuilding as much as we can. But our group, our committee, made that a priority for each of us, and we were able to get an all-party bill through the House that acknowledged that our recommendations were sound. The Minister of Health and Long-Term Care has introduced a comprehensive mental health strategy starting with children. And to show you that our government was absolutely committed to that beginning, we did put $257 million over 3 years in our budget. That first year is absolutely guaranteed for this fiscal year, into children's mental health. So we're going to begin to see some of those waits shortened. But we're also going to put nurses with mental health expertise into schools. Teachers often are aware of issues with the child, and sometimes parents find it very difficult to actually accept that the teacher, who is not a health professional, is sort of uneasy about a child's situation. So we think that having nurses with mental health expertise kind of bridge the gap with the parent might be very helpful. And why I'm so proud of that was your question originally, was because I really felt we were being effective as legislators in that position. It was, the debate was, a lot of it was behind closed doors, but from different parties, we really understood that each of us wanted to do the very best we could, and some of those individuals have become very good friends of mine.
If re-elected, you head back down to Parliament. What is your first personal mandate?
Obviously, as you know, we serve in our caucus at the pleasure of the Premier in terms of his assignment of duties, in terms of, as I was parliamentary assistant, I actually requested to be a parliamentary assistant to the Minister of the Environment, so I was very fortunate in that.
Why environment and not health?
Because environment is very linked to health, but because of my background in health, sometimes perhaps my own technical knowledge can, I don't know whether to say be threatening to bureaucrats. It's a little difficult. So I found it very useful to be just slightly to the side of health, where I could bring the health perspective to the environmental table.
Okay. And so if you head back to Parliament?
I will hopefully, if re-elected, serve at whatever capacity the Premier assigns me in terms of working on behalf, obviously, of my residents. I have said transit continues, transportation gridlock is probably so important in the daily lives of my constituents, and job creation. So the whole research and innovation agenda, we've had some wonderful examples, in fact in Stouffville, Teva, the investment we made. Now Teva, a global company.
Can you tell our viewers what that was?
Okay, sure. The province, through the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade, invested $5.6 million to assist Teva in developing their high-potency drug manufacturing plant. Teva themselves, put in some $60 million. And that was an agreement signed. Teva is an Israeli-based global company, but the jobs are here in Stouffville. So it led to an additional 200 jobs. And many of the people working in Teva, because I've had the good fortune to meet them, actually live in Stouffville. So again, they're thrilled to be able to live and work in the same community. And there's more potential. But I thought that was really exciting. You you remember, it was very targeted. It was the engineers, the accountants, the lawyers, and the architects.
Depending on how you define engineers, if I'm in the computer business, I can hire
PEng.
It has to be a PEng.
Absolutely, have the papers. It was actually, a very small program, and it was a recommendation made through consultation, clearly with the professionals involved, that Canadian citizens, and as you know, you have to live here for 3 years. It takes you several months to become a citizen, so usually you're about year 4, and yet no longer than 5 years in Canada. So it was a very narrow window.
How many people would meet those criteria?
I think it was about 1,200 or something. They had an estimate of that number. Of potential. And it was to give them clearly, because it wasn't a job, it was a contract for up to a year, to gain Canadian experience. And was it interpreted by our opponents correctly? Absolutely not. In fact, language was used, as you know, foreign worker, about new Canadians, and I know at the door people have been truly offended by that.
Floods of new Canadians, I believe, is one thing I've read in the media. So,
we all have a longevity in Canada of some either generations or decades or years.
all right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie.